All right, so let's go. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to Know Who Drives Return by Boardroom Alpha. I'm David Drapkin. I'm with Joanna Makris.
Hi.
And today it's our pleasure to be joined by Dr. Jun Pei, who's the CEO and co-founder of LiDAR company Cepton. Dr. Pei has a long history in optics and electronics, which I'll let him talk about rather than myself. But Cepton also recently made its public debut after having completed a SPAC transaction with Growth Capital Acquisition Corp in a $1.5 billion deal that closed earlier this month. So first off, hey, Dr. Pei, just congratulations on the deal. And we really thank you for taking the time to talk to us today.
Well, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. This is actually the first few interviews we granted right after we become public. It's a pleasure to be here.
That's great. And so how about to kick things off, mind just giving the listeners a little bit of an introduction to yourself, maybe a bit of a career background and sort of how you got here today?
Yeah, great. Actually, many people had interest in me. I'm an engineer. Actually, even when I fill out going through the U.S. Customs, I actually, ask for my profession. I write down I'm an engineer. And indeed, actually, I got my PhD in optical engineering from Stanford University, quite some time ago, more than 20 years ago, and never left the field of optics. I had the keen interest, even from childhood, of becoming an optical engineer, looking at the prisms and the colors and all of those things. And fortunately bestowed on me, giving me opportunity to study optics. And actually, I spent a decade in the semiconductor metrology world using optics to measure very, very small things, nanometer things. One thing led to another. There's another big story of that as well, how I got involved in the LiDAR business. And long story short is 6 years ago, we started Cepton Technologies, and here we are, a public company.
So let's kind of dive in a little bit to your company's positioning, which I think is unique. This is a crowded space. As you know, there are dozens now, I think, LiDAR companies all vying for, the automotive market. But what I think is unique about Cepton is that you're also looking at the environment for the Internet of Things and industrial and non-automotive applications. So could you maybe start by just telling us how you view the market and how you view the addressable market over time?
Yeah, so maybe it's good to spend a couple minutes on talking about the history of Cepton when we started in 2016. And that's a time, 6 years ago, if you recall, is a time of huge enthusiasm for fully autonomous vehicles, level 4, level 5 vehicles. It's right around the corner, 2018, we're going to get cars on the street everywhere. We came into the picture during right that time. There were plenty of LiDAR companies with the aspiration of providing the eyes, the critical components for the fully autonomous vehicles. But we came in with a very different mentality. Maybe it's because of my age or education or engineering background. Altogether, we came in with the thought that the fully autonomous vehicles, level 4, level 5, won't be here anytime soon. It was a very unpopular view back then. Actually, I was a laughing stock among many investors. Yet we stuck to it. And in hindsight, that focus we had, which was we wanted to build a LiDAR for the cars of today, the everyday vehicles, for the ADAS systems, to actually promote safety before we promote autonomy. So that was the thesis of our company. We want to build a LiDAR that goes on to the car that you can buy from the dealership. So that's when we started this this company for. And over the years, there was a lot of emphasis on that thesis, which proliferated down to the requirement. We want to build LiDAR that's cost effective, actually performs well, but also has the reliability and actually can be vouched by a tier 1 supplier for its reliability, for its quality, for its price. So all of these things are actually big part of the automotive or traditional automotive supply chain. So I started, already talking about the so-called differentiation of Cepton. The differentiation actually started from even before we started the company. It's actually this concept. We're not going to build a LiDAR just yet for the level 4, level 5 vehicles, because we don't see the market there anytime soon. Now, coming down to today, coming back to your question, that the level 2+ to level 3 ADAS system is still going to be the largest market for LiDAR in the coming decade or decades. I can't project further than 10 years, but in the next 10 years, that will no doubtly occupy 80 to 90% of the LiDAR market.
And that is active safety. How do you define that for the non-tech people?
Well, ADAS, advanced driver assistant, well, first of all, you can think about it as a active emergency, automatic emergency braking system. You know, if there's a person in front of you walking and you're looking at your text message, the car will stop itself before you do. So these are some very simple illustrations. If there's an obstacle on the road or you're veering off your lane, the car will take over, at least for that moment, to get you, higher level of safety. Well, there is maybe another different angle just from the automotive manufacturer perspective. I've learned, I'm not going to release which one it is. A automotive manufacturer has the aspiration in the next decade, they want to reduce their accident rate by 90%. So they have these many accidents on their vehicles, they want to reduce it by 90%. There are scenarios you can never get rid of at the moment, but 90% is a big number in terms of saving the number of lives. So that's where LiDAR comes into play. And there's no secret anymore that GM has released their Ultra Cruise program into the public. And the centerpiece of that program is actually LiDAR. Guess what? It's Cepton LiDAR. And that's where we actually made a name for ourselves with the initial focus into this largest design win. And indeed, that will be a flagship ADAS program helping the consumers, whether it's for active safety or assistant driving, however you can think about it. It will make your driving experience a lot easier.
So there are so many companies who are in the space, and almost all of them say that they have the magic kind of trifecta of, price, technology, and manufacturing scale. And you've articulated a lot as a company about your manufacturing relationships, your tier 1 OEM relationships, and how you get there. So I would love for you to, shed some light on your differentiation and how you look at the market.
Yeah, I at the beginning of this discussion, I mentioned I have a PhD of optical engineering from a world-class Stanford University, and I spent all my professional life in optics. Yet, for me, looking at this LiDAR landscape, it can be pretty confusing to differentiate, which technology is actually the best one and what. So before, I can certainly go down to that rabbit hole and talk a lot about technology. But I'm going to, as a technologist, maybe, I want to claim in this LiDAR landscape, if you look at all the notable LiDAR company CEOs, I probably have the highest education and professional background in optics. But to your question, will not be starting with, we have the MMT technology, we have the best data processing. It's actually the only criteria to validate a technology is actually from commercial design wins. It's actually not from technology itself. I am probably very qualified to talk with you, giving you a 3-hour lecture of optics and technology all I want, but without a commercial design win, it remains as a scientific exercise or an engineering exercise. So right now I look at dozens and dozens of LiDAR company, and with almost 8, I think it's 8 already public, including us. I characterize these LiDAR companies only into 2 categories. And it's very, very simple. As I mentioned, ADAS is going to be the biggest market for LiDAR in the coming decade. So the 2 category of companies is one category is the company, the LiDAR company with a design win, the other without. That's how I characterize it. And those with design wins, you can count them with one hand, and the rest is the rest. So I haven't talked about a single bit about technology. It's all about the commercial design win. How you're going to get the validation for your technology is through a recognition from a notable OEM that awarded you with real dollars, a real program that you can profit from many years to come. So that's I'm sorry if I diverted away from technology, but this is my answer to seemingly rather complex question. How you differentiate? You look at the design wins.
Is it too late if you're a LiDAR company with no relationship announced to date? Is it sewn up?
Well, never say too late. Never say never. But we actually first engaged with General Motors in 2017 to compete with about 30 to 40 LiDAR companies back then for this one single Ultra Cruise program. And then we were awarded, I'm giving you the time perspective, 2017. We were awarded the program in December of 2019. That's more than 2 years ago. And in the past 2 years, when other companies are making these big promotions of a possible market size, we were actually the winner working through the sausage making process of the A samples, B samples, and C samples. And we're now, it's no secret that Ultra Cruise will come out in 2023. It's still a year away from its actual release. So think about this, 2017. 2023. This is a very long process, and this is actually longer than developing a medicine, a vaccine, if you draw a comparison. Very, very rigorous process. It involves the Cepton developing the innovative MMT technology. It involves Koito manufacturing, the Japanese manufacturer that will volume produce this and vouch for its technology and vouch for its liability. And then there's the General Motors who actually spend tremendous of effort integrating into the Ultra Cruise program. So this is is it too late to enter into such a program? Well, certainly for GM, the competition started in many years ago, and it was already awarded, and we are sole sourced for this program. But there will be always programs in the future. Maybe I can just be bold and say I do feel that there are too many LiDAR companies out there.
Yeah. So what happens? I mean, do they have value, a lot of these companies, or is it just a shakeout?
Well, you're asking me to predict the future, so that's a little bit difficult. But I'll stick to my statement that there are too many LiDAR companies, and something should happen naturally. Maybe slowly, but naturally, that this industry, at the beginning, there's a wild west of everybody competing with everybody, but eventually it will become a mature company, a mature industry with a fewer companies that supply, a selected few type of technologies to the application. So I think the industry will slowly morph into a more mature landscape than the wild west as it is today.
And you mentioned you mentioned the time, so it's a long process. Obviously, one of the benefits of you guys using the SPAC route is able to tell your story in the future. And so how confident are you in the financial projections that you laid out 3 or 4 years down the line?
Well, the SPAC field is again, starting a couple of years ago, is another wild west, much wilder than LiDAR for sure.
For sure.
and it's exactly because of what you said, that you actually can articulate your story for the future. And coming down to the LiDAR landscape, it turned out many LiDAR companies would talk about the TAM, the total addressable market, and the OEM programs, and at the end, there are only a few OEMs. You talk about the top 10 automotive OEMs. That's pretty much 80-90% of all the cars are produced in the world. So it's actually very few customers. This is a B2B business, and the 2B part is very few customers. Now, with that said, all these LiDAR companies basically are talking about the same customers. That's just the fact of that. And how confident we are? Yeah, well, like many others, we talk about our future. We talk about our projections. Unlike many others, we actually have the largest LiDAR design win in the automotive industry. Just putting these numbers into perspective, Luminar has a design win with Volvo, and Volvo is ranked number 28 in the volume production in the world. Innovis has a production design win with BMW, and BMW ranks number 13 in the world. Cepton has a design win with GM, and GM is number 3 in the world and number 1 in North America. And the volume that we have won is actually greater than all the other LiDAR company design wins combined and some. So, and we're talking about the programs leading to 2027 now already, and in discussion for 2030. So these are what we call certainties in our projection. So am I confident? Well, again, never say never. Yeah, but I'm a lot more confident with the design win under our wraps in comparison to others.
Yeah, and when you speaking to your point about the competitive landscape and other announced design wins, how do you get from design win into full commercial production? And what are some of the milestones, and how should we be thinking about how do you get to announcement to real production?
Yeah, that is actually a very good question. I cannot appreciate enough. In fact, even the last 2 years after we had the design win, I learned so much how to appreciate that part of the process. Everybody thought that, to get a design win is this huge milestone, great. But turned out the subsequent sausage making is just going to be a lot more work. And the first criteria, having a design win and afterwards having a successful execution of the design win, the first and absolutely prerequisite is you have a tier 1. If you don't have a tier 1 partner working, making a automotive component that's actually related to safety, you don't, as a startup company, you don't even have the financial capability for the liability portion of it. You have to be a tier 1. And very fortunate with us, not only we have a tier 1 partner, we have a tier 1 that actually is a 100-year-old Japanese tier 1. You can imagine how conservative the Japanese engineering approach is. And with a tier 1, Koito has been a supplier for GM for many decades already. And they stand behind our technology. They stand behind their product. In fact, we're going to be the tier 2 supplier supplying the technology and critical component. They're actually going to be the one that manufactured this product and eventually deliver to GM with their name on it. So that's actually a prerequisite in getting through, we talked about, the A samples, B samples, C samples, and the PPAC process. All of these things are, for a technology company, could be completely foreign to us, but to a tier 1 company, they've been making components for the last century. They've gone through this process for many of their product lines. So that's actually, it's not a luxury, it's a necessity to have a tier 1 together with you working on this. And I think many LiDAR companies are adopting this model. This is a very classical automotive supply chain model. There's a OEM, tier 1, tier 2. And there are companies that's venture to do without, but we choose to do it in a conservative way. And this is another huge element for us to capture the GM design win.
One of the things I think is interesting about your financial projections is, you're talking about real earnings. So, over a 20% EBITDA margin by 2024. But then when you think about the space, it seems like a lot of companies are coming to market with more or less off-the-shelf components, and the secret sauce is in the ASIC. And at the same time, you have car makers saying that they want below a $500 price point. So why isn't this a commoditized business? And how, what is the differentiator, and how do you get to those kind of earnings projections?
Okay, so there are a lot of loaded questions there, but I'll answer the simplest one first, which is why isn't this a commoditized product yet? And perhaps I'll ask a question for you that will it become a commoditized product? The answer is yes, absolutely. Once you get into cars, and in the coming years or decades, it will become commoditized. That's no question about that. And for us, just for you to know, Cepton started with a LiDAR concept for ADAS, and we want to build LiDAR. We have the design win. We started as a hardware company, but the name Cepton, CPTON, when we started, is with the aspiration that we want to become a perception company. CEPT is part of the word perception, and ON is like a photon, electron is an element, ON, the Latin ending. So it's Cepton really is a fabricated word that means an element of perception. So this element perception certainly has the hardware end of it, but we have an aspiration of actually providing more value in terms of the software and the perception capability for the future of cars. So that sort of answers the second part of the question. First, the commoditization will happen, but it's not happening yet. We have a very, enviable MMT LiDAR design, and that got us a design win. And that hardware architecture belongs to Cepton and Cepton only. We still can enjoy that margin for quite a while. I see, we're happily enjoying that, but we're certainly not going to be stopping there as an innovative company. We are already having, perception software released to the end customers for various applications. Of course, for auto applications, it actually demands even more rigorous testing process. But as the world of smart cars evolve, we will evolve with it.
When you think about, from an investor perspective, obviously yourselves and some of your competitors really, hit a hot market last year, having capitalized on the SPAC frenzy, if you will. LiDAR was very popular with investors; things were trading up. But it's impossible not to note that a lot of your competitors, the share price has been beaten down a little bit. Do you think that it's too early for an investor to be involved here, and you need to take time to see how things progress? Or, if I were a prospective investor today, do I wait, or is now the right time to hop in?
Well, okay. These are always subjective answers. So
for sure.
Early, what is late? But if you ask me in a casual conversation, I would say, yeah, last year or even the year before, it was too early. But not anymore. Ultra Cruise is coming out next year. So that's the perspective. It's another year to go before we actually see everyday vehicle with Cepton LiDAR inside, and you can just go down to your dealership and buy one. So you gauge your own timing, see whether it's early or too late. But certainly in the past, it was too early. In the future, it will be too late.
How much is price and form factor an important part of the decision, right? Because a lot of these companies say, oh, your LiDAR is too clunky, it looks too ugly, it's never going to go on a car roof, right? You guys have, very elegant product. So talk to us a little bit about how.
Yeah. So remember our thesis at the beginning of the company, we want to build ADAS LiDAR. Okay. So it's for everyday cars. And when we had that focus, that thesis, that came down for the engineering team and myself being part of it, with a set of requirement. That's what we call balance between performance, cost, and reliability. You can actually go into one, as I call these three pillars of design for LiDAR. You can go into one pillar very quickly and get into a rabbit hole and design. I go back to my Stanford lab, and I can build a LiDAR for space station docking that sees kilometers with highest resolution, and it just costs a couple $1 million a piece. It will never see its day in cars. So that's actually a rabbit hole for you to go into terms of performance. And the form factor is actually a part of the performance. You can build a very tiny LiDAR. You can build everything into one piece, but it will cost how much ever time, how much ever effort to get it. So that's part of the performance. But frankly, the design win that we captured, this largest design win, I don't want to say it's a bigger piece, but it's a huge piece to have the price right. The price is not what I project, what I think. We use practically all off-the-shelf parts except for one very important ASIC that we design our own. Now, this price is something that tier one has to vouch with legal ramifications binding to the OEM. So they have, Cepton provide a quote in GM. In fact, we don't even have an official, technically, we don't have a contract with GM. We have a contract with Koito, and Koito has a contract with General Motors. So that's how the chain works. So it is actually the price is something that a traditional tier one needs to vouch for. And that turned out to be a huge element, if not the most important element that captures the design win. So yeah, I think you know, a lot of the design effort, you know, the price reduction does not first come from scaling. Okay, it comes from the design. What we have been using is a technology called MMT that's very much reminiscent to a loudspeaker inside the car. It has a voice coil, it runs over a magnet, has a micro motion. MMT stands for micro motion technology. So all of these technical details has been proven before in the loudspeaker. That's a low cost and highly reliable element. Just like, you know, loudspeakers in your cars today, we actually translate that into a LiDAR. And that was purely for the cost benefit. And with that, we got this. So, you know, performance is really great to see in terms of a beauty contest for a picture, you know, see who has the LiDAR that can see, you know, 2 kilometers that has the prettiest picture, maybe even with color involved. So when you actually use the LiDAR in cars, you never see, the driver never sees the picture the LiDAR sees. What you will feel the LiDAR is, okay, there's a pedestrian, stop. That's what the LiDAR value is. No pictures involved. So the cost, the reliability, and of course, the performance is part of that.
So by next year, will we see Cepton LiDAR in a tier, you know, in a real commercial auto?
The GM has already announced their Ultra Cruise will be coming out, starting from the high-end vehicles, the Cadillacs, all the way proliferating down to their portfolio of platforms and models. And the GM has already announced that their timing is 2023, and many more details, such as you know, relate to your form factor question. The LiDAR will be put behind the windshield, so it doesn't affect any aesthetics, any design principles of the vehicle. And more importantly, you know, you can imagine if it's behind the windshield is actually a common part to many different type of cars. So that has a very good technology portability towards many other things. So that's the that is, you know, a great benefit. Yeah, so somewhere, you know, per GM schedule, 2023 is the release of Ultra Cruise, and in it, the centerpiece of Cepton LiDAR will be there.
What do you say to investors? It seems like investors are probably going to buy a basket of these stocks, right? We can't, you know, probably the industry shakes out to 2 or 3 companies. What do you say to investors who are trying to figure out which of these stocks to own? What are, you know, without, you know, lambasting your competitors, give us a sense for, you know, what you would say to someone trying to figure out how to invest here.
Fundamentals. Look at fundamentals. You know, there's maybe I'm just too old to be a, you know, a day trader. I'm not a day trader, and I don't you know, play with stocks as the word play, it means a lot to many. I don't do that. When I invest, I look at just the long-term fundamentals. And this really boils down to, you know, you can talk the technology all you want. It's really the pocketbook at the end that actually makes a difference. So focus on who has the best commercial traction, and who has the design win, and that will tell you how realistic those projection numbers are. Invest according to that analysis.
Yeah. So I'm thinking a fellow LiDAR SPAC also debuted recently, and performance was nothing like yours. Your stock has held up well. You know, talk to us a little bit about what you see as, you know, some of the differentiators. You know, you had the same market timing. Is it a result of your, you know, your entrenched relationships?
Well, yeah, you know, we were only 2 days apart in terms of coming out to the market, yet the response is completely different. It's for everybody to see. There are certainly the technology element of it. as I have mentioned, our goal, from the beginning was very clear. And it's not only clear to us, it's clear to the OEMs, it's clear to the tier ones, and very importantly, it's clear to the investors that invested it to us earlier on and along the way. So that, perhaps through this interview and the way I talk, you already sensed how determined I am and how focused I have been in this company's direction. I feel, there are some companies, perhaps including some of the latest spec companies, did not have that focus. It was when the level 4, level 5 autonomous vehicles were hot, let's jump on that.
Right.
And when ADAS became the only savior, let's jump on that. When you can't have a design win soon, then you jump on some other peripheral market to promote your product. So it's kind of unlike what we have, there's one focus and we never deviate from that. So it almost indicates in the stock price that we're the stable factor. We're just, we're not jumping up and down, we're just moving along correctly. And then others would be a little choppy, I would say. Right. But I'm not a stock analyst. You asked me a very difficult question out of my comfort zone. How about ask me, how my LiDAR works? I can tell you more about optics than stock market.
No, appreciate that. And hopefully you maintain, you get rid of some of that volatility that you see in the space. And so I guess just to wrap, I know it's early days, but any reflections on life as a public company CEO, and navigating, a different world that is, the public markets. Sometimes it can be easier to operate, in the private world where, you're not subjected to quarterly earnings calls and, agitated shareholders. So I guess early reflections on life as a public company CEO and
yeah. Many people ask me that question, especially lately, even including my parents. Well, I told you, I actually went to school for a very long time, getting my PhD ultimately in my late 20s. And earlier on, people asked me, why did you get your PhD? Why did you go to school for such a long time? And my answer to that is I don't know what I was going to do in life. So I just went on going to school until there's no more school to go to. So that was my answer, and it was a very honest answer. Frankly, working on Cepton, people ask me, did you have the aspiration of going public? Did you have the aspiration of making a $10 billion company? All of these questions, no, I never had. I mean, I'm just answering in a truthful way. I started to do a company, want to do something good, and want to do something more meaningful, and just move along, and then of course, there's the technology development, there's the operational development, there's the financial development for the company. These are all part of my work moving forward. And SPAC, becoming a SPAC IPO company is why do we do a SPAC IPO? Number one, is a financing event. We're drawing in adequate amount of money for us to execute our programs. And then there's a marketing effect of that. So these are all elements of operating the company. And it's just one step. We're moving forward with this one step. Of course, I have to deal with the earning calls and the public facing, and that's part of my job as we grow bigger and bigger. I don't have an end goal. I just want to move forward and forward. I just don't have an end goal. So this is I wouldn't say nothing. There's certainly more work and more demanding on my time and energy, but I signed up for this as part of developing the company.
Signed up, you did indeed. Hey, Doctor, really appreciate you taking the time here today to tell the story. Obviously, a lot happening in the space, so we'll keep a close eye on how everything progresses. So thanks again.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Awesome.